Coming up on Lawmakers. The Lieutenant Governor calls for a tuition freeze in state colleges and universities. The Speaker of the House says why not treat some Hope scholarships as loans? And a Ten Commandments bill, some think shall pass and some think shall not. Those stories are next on Lawmakers.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Tuesday, January 13th. Here are your hosts, Nwandi Lawson and Gerald Bryant.
Good evening, everyone. Also on tonight's broadcast, Governor Perdue suggests more Greenspace and more caseworkers for the Department of Family and Children's Services.
And the Senate Minority Leader says the governor's faith-based initiative bill is moving too fast. But our lead story tonight, keeping hope alive.
And Saving the Hope Scholarship was the main menu item at the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast this morning. Other issues and agendas for the 2004 session were discussed, but the troubled lottery-funded scholarship was the concern of everyone who spoke at the event. David Zelski joins us live from the Capitol with more. David.
Well, that's right, Nwandi. Last year, the legislature formed a bipartisan Hope Scholarship Study Committee who unveiled their five-part solution yesterday. But the governor, lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House have announced some of their ideas as well, which were all discussed over this morning's breakfast.
My Hope Protection Plan will do the following. Implement a 3.0 grade point average for every qualifying scholar. An 80 average should no longer be the standard. We must ensure that a 3.0 average in Toccoa is the same as a 3.0 average in Douglas. 2, to remain eligible for Hope, scholars will have their grades checked every 24 credit hours to ensure that a B average is maintained. No longer should Hope pay for extra semesters simply because full-time students are taking smaller class loads. And finally, and most importantly, Governor, I would sincerely appreciate your support in calling on the regents to voluntarily freeze undergraduate tuition and fees for the next 3 years. A 16% growth in cost year in and year out is enough for now.
The governor's plan includes linking the SAT to the scholarship, something the lieutenant governor adamantly opposes. But this idea was backed by Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson.
The governor's proposal simply takes the SAT score and links it to your Hope application. You don't have to get a 500 on the SAT score and you will still get Hope. After one semester, then they'll look back and see whether you still have a B average. So under his proposal, the SAT doesn't matter in the Hope. But by linking it to the Hope Scholarship, kids will pay more attention to it. They'll study harder. They'll go to sleep at night. I guarantee that if we put Hope and SAT together, our SAT scores will rise.
Speaker Coleman then proposed his idea to keep students who've been educated with Hope dollars in the state after graduation.
Change Hope to a repayable or a forgivable loan program. It doesn't do us any good to educate children or educate adults who leave this state and practice their profession in other states. And if they do, maybe we ought to think about asking them to pay Hope back.
Hope has paved the way for over 750,000 students since it began in 1993, but the shortage of funds are expected to affect the program come 2008 unless something is done. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
Thanks a lot, David.
And tomorrow on Lawmakers, we'll talk with the head of Georgia's university system about the various Hope Scholarship proposals. Chancellor Thomas Meredith will be our guest to respond to the call for freezing tuitions and fees throughout the university system. That's tomorrow night on Lawmakers at 7 p.m.
Governor Perdue opened the Eggs and Issues breakfast with a summary of his initiatives for the 2004 session. He said his focus this year is children, jobs, and living within our means, meaning no tax increases.
I'm pleased to announce this morning that as part of that process, we're increasing the number of DFACS caseworkers by 65 positions. And you ask, how are we doing that? These posts are going to be filled by moving positions out of central offices to bring more expertise and staff to the front lines where it's needed. I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor and the members of the General Assembly and law enforcement yesterday for coming together to introduce the Children's Protection Package that's been so long needed. As we are aware, Georgia remains the only state in our country without a child abuse felony statute that includes criminally negligent behavior. We must ensure that Georgia develops a solid and competitive 21st century economy. We're going to do that by supporting our existing industries and businesses, helping them to get the trained workers, infrastructure, new ideas, and markets that they need to grow in Georgia. My budget will include a 2% across-the-board pay raise for teachers. It also adds an additional increase for veteran teachers. In all, nearly two-thirds of Georgia teachers will get a 5% raise. And folks, I don't know if you've been in the classroom lately, but I believe they deserve it.
In addition, the governor discussed legislation ensuring that faith-based providers can compete for state funding fairly without being discriminated against. He's also proposed that $20 million be budgeted for Greenspace. Further details of the governor's initiative are expected in tomorrow's State of the State address.
And Governor Perdue's second State of the State address can be seen here on Georgia Public Broadcasting tomorrow night. The address is scheduled for 8 p.m. and will be simulcast on your local Georgia Public Broadcasting radio station. Time permitting, we'll have legislative reaction to Governor Perdue's speech. Again, that's the State of the State address from 8 to 9 p.m. tomorrow night. Meanwhile, legislation designed to free businesses from unnecessary regulations and state support for Atlanta's sewer problems were also brought up at the Eggs and Issues breakfast by Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson. He says Mayor Shirley Franklin and Atlanta have stepped up to fix the city sewer system. Now it's time for the state to do its part.
The governor's recommended a $500 million loan package over 10 years with state oversight of the process. I propose that we give Atlanta the option of a local sales tax, sunset it for 5 years, and designate it only to the capital improvements of their sewer. With those two options, the City of Atlanta has been able to, at a 15-0 vote, triple the sewer rates for their residents and business and pay their fair share. That is good for downstream Georgia. It is good for the economy of Georgia. Atlanta is the heart of our economy, and we must assist her. We will also take up legislation that is designed to free business from unnecessary and burdensome regulation. Senator Ross Tolleson from Houston County is handling that bill. According to studies, regulation is the single biggest factor of why small businesses fail to start.
Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin addressed the House and Senate today. She expressed her gratitude for the partnership she's been able to forge with legislators from around the state.
Each time I have come, no matter how difficult the problem, sometimes controversial the problem, you have listened, you have given me a chance to speak, you've given me a chance to explain our point of view, and in every single case, 100% of the time, you have offered your hands in partnership and support and guidance. So welcome and thanks, and I look forward to seeing you the balance of the session. Thank you very much.
On the table this session are measures to help the capital city reconstruct its ailing sewer system and increase the solvency of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport.
The controversy surrounding posting the 10 Commandments in public buildings is receiving attention from Georgia legislators. Chrissy Thrasher joins us live from the Capitol with more. Chrissy.
Well, Gerald, Representative Warren Massey plans to introduce legislation that supports the posting of religious documents in public buildings. And he says the United States Constitution backs him up. It's a topic that is surrounded by debate. Should the 10 Commandments be posted in public areas? While this issue receives mixed emotions, I'm not going to get upset about it. I'm going to do my own thing regardless of what they're going to have, posted or not posted.
I don't see anything wrong with it as long as other religious documents can be posted as well.
I feel very strongly that they should not be posted in public federal government buildings.
Lawmakers who support posting the 10 Commandments are proposing legislation that says the state has the right to publicly display religious documents under the First and 10th Amendments of the Constitution.
The First Amendment to the Constitution only restricts Congress from making laws, and the 10th Amendment of the Constitution makes the state sovereign, and all powers not delegated to the Congress rest with the people and to the states. Under that pretext, I believe that we have the right to make laws regarding religion.
But the American Civil Liberties Union disagrees, saying that the government should recognize separation between church and state.
The United States Constitution prohibits the government from promoting or disparaging religion, and therefore it prevents the government from taking a stand on religion one way or another. And because of that, governments cannot sponsor a display of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments is a religious creed, and so the government can't promote that religious creed.
And Representative Massey plans to introduce the bill in the House later this week. Reporting live from the House chambers, I'm Chrissy Thrasher for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Chrissy.
House Republicans today outlined their legislative priorities, and topping the list are adoption of a statewide sales tax of 3 or 4% and repeal of the local ad valorem property taxes, tort reform by limiting medical malpractice awards, endorsing the public display of the Ten Commandments, allowing private companies to administer driver's license tests, and a requirement that the photos of convicted domestic abusers be published in a local newspaper. Now, these were among the things that the Republican leaders were outlining. In addition, they want to urge that the Hope Scholarship be tied to a minimum SAT score.
Governor Perdue's proposal to allow faith-based organizations to contract to provide some state services is causing debate before it even reaches the Senate floor. Today, Senate Minority Leader Michael Meyer von Bremen said he doesn't accept the argument that it's a short and simple bill.
The Freedom of Religion and Establishment Clause of the Constitution of the United States is one of the shortest clauses in the entire Constitution. But for over 200 years, things that are short, like the religious clause, are not easy to understand because it's been interpreted time and time again by the United States Supreme Court, by circuit courts all over the country, and by our district courts. So I suggest to you that if it's that easy because it's short and simplistic, that we have nothing to do with our Supreme Court and our appellate bodies because they didn't need to address this short issue for the past 200 plus years. We need to hurry, I was told, because there's a case out there that could harm the funding of these initiatives. But then when I realized, and I'm for that when we need to try to correct something and there's an urgent need, but I realized this is a constitutional amendment we're dealing with. And for all of you who have been in this body for many years and who have been in this body for a short time, you already know that a constitutional amendment means that we don't pass that out. The voters of Georgia make that decision, and the earliest that decision is going to be is through a special referendum, and I heard nothing about calling a special referendum, or through the primary process, which will take place in late July, or in the general election, which will take place in November. I just want to ask that if we're going to deal with something that's a constitutional issue, let's let that train slow down. And I'm not using that in a negative manner, I'm using it in a positive manner. Let's let it slow so that it stops and picks up passengers and they can take part in the ride.
Governor Perdue's floor leader, Senator Dan Lee, responded that if the minority leader didn't like the bill, he shouldn't have voted for it in the Senate Rules Committee, and said, Lee, the bill is not being pushed through the legislature.
But I have never understood, and as I stand here today, I do not understand how any member of this body, including the senator from the 12th, can feel strongly against something. You can debate against something, and then you vote for it. We had a lot of that a couple of years ago. Voting for things you don't think are right, but you vote for them anyway because of something that I hadn't seen yet. Coercion, promise, something other than what should make you vote the way you're supposed to vote. And I don't know if what he said this morning tells me that's what he did yesterday. But I rise today to assure you, on behalf of your governor and the governor of this state, that there is no train driving home any legislation. One of the best opportunities I've had to see real government at work was about a week before this governor took office. He told a group of senators that we're going to do something different this year. Pointing over here, he said this body gets to be the Senate, that body over there gets to be the House. He's going to try to be the governor, and then we'll have some agencies like the Department of Education and others that'll do their job. there'll be open debate, and good things will happen. We'll wind up with good government. And I'll tell you, in my words, we hadn't had that in the past. And I thought yesterday was a good example of just that. Now, this bill, this resolution, this question that the governor wants to present to the people of Georgia is not being rushed.
The bill passed Senate rules yesterday and is scheduled for debate on the Senate floor on Thursday.
State funding for faith-based organizations, the budget, and higher education were among the topics I discussed with House Majority Leader Jimmy Skipper this afternoon. I asked him his opinion about plans to freeze tuition at state schools and alter the administration of the Hope Scholarship.
I think the fact that you've got so many plans being discussed at this point indicates the importance of the Hope Scholarship issue to all the members of the legislature and certainly to the people in the state of Georgia. We're going to look at all those plans as they go through and discuss them and make sure that we do the right thing, because the ultimate goal that we've got is to make the Hope Scholarship program continue to work. It's the best scholarship program in the nation, and we want to continue that, and so that's what we're going to do, and we're going to pick the best plan that we think is appropriate to do that.
Now, certainly, of course, the budget is very big on everyone's mind, and they're looking towards that 2005 date when we're looking at those 5% across-the-board cuts. From your standpoint, how are those going to perhaps best be executed without impacting people negatively across the state?
It's going to be a tough situation, because what we've got here is we're coming out of a recession. We've had 5 months of positive growth in the state as far as our revenues are concerned, and so things are looking up. But at the same time, we've still got to continue the recovery in an orderly fashion. So it's going to be difficult to balance all the needs in the state, and what we're going to do is work to prioritize those needs to make sure that we provide the necessary services to the people of the state of Georgia. And as we go through the budget process, we're going to do that. And there's some things that we may have to do without on a temporary basis, but there are other things that we know we have got to do, and we will continue to do those on a full-time basis for the people of the state of Georgia.
Sounds like you all have your work cut out for you. I know as the governor has been unveiling bits and pieces of his legislative agenda, yesterday the Senate Rules Committee adopted or passed out the faith-based funding for government spending. I'm wondering how that piece of legislation, from your vantage point, how does that fare?
Well, we're going to look at it. To be honest with you, I haven't looked at it. It's just passed the Senate committee yesterday afternoon, the first day of the session, and we haven't looked at it because we're not quite sure what the Senate's going to pass. At the same time, I think that it's important for us to carefully look at that. We have a lot of different views, I think, in the House about that particular thing. I don't think that anybody is adverse to allowing local mainstream religious groups and other nonprofit groups assist the state in providing our mission and doing the things that we need to do for the people of the state of Georgia. But we have to look at it carefully so that we make sure there are no hidden agendas, so that we make sure that the funds are going where they need to be going and when they need to be going. And we want to make sure that we don't end up with funding for some kind of fringe groups or something like that. So we're going to be carefully looking at that to make sure that it does what everybody intends for it to do. The truth is that we already fund most of those kinds of institutions now under state government. We do it with contracts, and a lot of those contracts have been certainly held legal. And so it's not a brand new process. It's a different way to approach it maybe, or it's putting something in the Constitution that's not there now. But at the same time, we do a lot of that already. But we're very careful when we do that kind of stuff now to make sure that the groups, the entities that get these funds are going to use them like they should be used for the people of Georgia.
Now, certainly you, along with the rest of the House Democratic leadership, have been getting together and working on your own legislative agenda. If you would, for me, just rank what those top priorities are during this session.
Well, in fact, just this afternoon, we met with the House Democratic Caucus, and we unanimously passed our agenda, and we're going to present that to everyone tomorrow afternoon at a press conference we've got scheduled tomorrow afternoon. But we're going to be talking about prosperity for our citizens and for our state. We're going to be talking about and working on ethics issues. We're going to be working on academic opportunity, education. We're going to be working on protecting children, and we're also going to be working on health care issues that affects people all over the state. And those are the things that we think that the people are interested in us working on, and we intend to work on those during this session, and hopefully we will be successful in passing that agenda.
Well, now, of course, with the upcoming election and all 180 seats in the House coming up for grabs, how does that impact what you all have to do generally within the legislative business of this session and then looking ahead to the election?
Well, elections, given the fact in Georgia that legislative elections are every 2 years, they're never too far out of your mindset, I guess. But at the same time, we are given a job to do, and while we're here, we want to do what's best for the people of the state of Georgia, because the truth is, if we do what's best for the people of the state of Georgia, if we do what they want us to do, then we don't have to worry about re-election. We'll get re-elected.
Lawmakers will bring you expanded coverage of the House Democratic agenda on tomorrow's broadcast.
We also talk with Senator Bill Stevens, who is in a new role this year. He moves from being Governor Perdue's Senate floor leader last session to being Majority Leader this year. The session is 2 days old. What would be the headline so far?
A challenging session ahead, but off to a good start would, I think, be the headline.
The governor has already announced his child endangerment initiative in cooperation with the lieutenant governor, several other legislators. It looks like that might have smooth sailing this time. Any predictions?
Well, I think it will. I think that there's a bipartisan agreement that there's nothing more important than protecting our children in this state, and Governor Perdue's bill does that. It also adds a new part about protecting kids from methamphetamine labs in the home, and we didn't have that law in the books and don't now. But we will have shortly.
I know you can't speak for the House, but that's where the child endangerment bill stalled last year in the waning moments of the session. Are things going to be clear over there this year as far as that legislation is concerned?
I think there will be clearer. I think it was a mistake last year for that bill to be stalled, and I think everybody clearly recognizes that, and I think for the good of all the children in Georgia, we'll pass it this year, and I think it'll pass through the Senate in short order when we get it.
One of the big ongoing stories of the past several months, and certainly of this session, will be the Hope Scholarship. Efforts to save Hope. I don't think anyone is thinking Hope will go away, but I think a lot of people are aware of the funding problems for that. How do you think that is finally going to shake out? We've had a lot of recommendations. What are going to be the key proposals that probably will end up in legislation?
Well, I think there are a couple of key things that people need to know. First of all, the Hope Scholarship program is not going anywhere. It's going to be here for our children, our grandchildren, and beyond. That's the important thing. I think the commission, the bipartisan commission that was put together between the Senate and the House, has already written a prescription that when it's filled will save Hope. I don't think that drastic measures are necessary. I think that there will be, along the way, a linkage in some way to SAT scores, but that doesn't mean that if somebody doesn't make the threshold SAT score that they won't get Hope for the first year. They'll get a chance to do that, and then we'll look at it after the first semester. So that's the summary of what the governor's proposal is likely to be, as I understand it.
Is that kind of a compromise that the governor and Republicans hope will be able to get through both houses, that to address the SAT situation a little later down the road?
Well, I think that nobody finds it acceptable that we're 50th in the nation in SAT scores. That's totally unacceptable. We have to do something about it. You have to wonder what would have happened if we had linked in any way SAT scores to the Hope Scholarship program 10 years ago. I don't think we would be 50th. So I think it's the right message to send, but I want to be clear that even if a person doesn't make a minimum SAT score, they'll still get a chance to have a Hope Scholarship program, and that's what they need to know.
At the Eggs and Issues breakfast this morning, a couple of interesting proposals thrown out, one by the lieutenant governor, who was talking about the idea of freezing tuition for 2 or 3 years as a way of bringing cost into line. Is that a proposal you had heard before today?
Well, I think there's been a lot of talk about keeping tuition affordable, and it's arguable whether or not that Georgia tuition is not a great deal already. I don't think the answer is in those kind of sound bites or those kind of proposals. The answer is in fundamentally addressing the foundation of the Hope Scholarship program, and that's what we've already come to an agreement on in some ways. And I think that that dramatic announcements like that are fun politically, but when it comes to policy, it's not necessary.
Speaker Terry Coleman, during the question and answer period, I believe, made a suggestion of tying Hope to being a refundable loan if students were to move out of state to work after they got their college education, or a forgivable loan if they remained in Georgia for a period of time. What about that suggestion?
I think that's an uphill fight. I think that I don't see the Senate adopting that kind of measure. I could be surprised, but I think that people understand that earning a Hope Scholarship along the way by having a 3.0 average is the right thing to do and to let families have flexibility. But that proposal has not been fully discussed yet, so we'll have to wait and see exactly what the Speaker's proposing.
We just have a little time left. Let's stay with education. The governor would like to see teachers and perhaps state employees get a 2% pay raise during the next budget. Is that going to have smooth sailing?
I think it will. I think it's also important to know there's not just a 2% increase for teachers, but for veteran teachers, it's the equivalent of a 5% increase, and they're worth it. We respect them, but we also need to pay them, and we can't afford to have good teachers leave the profession, so we need to pay them.
Senator Stevens, a lot of things to discuss. We look forward to having you on the program throughout the session. Senator Bill Stevens, who is Majority Leader in the State Senate, thanks for joining us on Lawmakers.
Thank you, Gerald. Good night.
The Senate Education Committee invited State Superintendent Kathy Cox to brief it on several issues today. Georgia's schools' performance in the No Child Left Behind program was at the top of the agenda, and Lawmakers Jesse Freeman has the story. Jesse.
In in the No Child Left Behind program, a passing school is said to have made adequate yearly progress. In this first year of testing, 65% of Georgia schools received that mark. Superintendent Cox said that new curriculum is in the works, and she said that new curriculum is in the works and went on to say that it is important for the department to receive adequate funding for staff development if that curriculum is to be implemented.
If we roll out this grand curriculum and we don't accompany that with a real commitment to staff development, both staff development money that we're going to need to do statewide as well as the staff development that's going to need to take place locally, then we are just setting people up for failure and disaster and really a waste of money.
In addition to that staff development funding, Superintendent Cox also expressed the need for pay raises for teachers. She says she is 100% behind the governor's proposed pay raise and the additional income step.
Any business that's facing tough economic times and has to decide allocation of resources, and it's going to be limited allocation of resources, the companies that make the decision to invest those limited resources in their people that have got to get the work done are the companies that survive rough economic times.
Now, after that very passionate plea by Superintendent Cox, several members of the committee actually responded with an amen like they were at a church service, so evidently it was a point well received. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Now, Jesse, did the superintendent give any indication of how long it would take for her new curriculum to show results?
Yes, and Wanda, she actually did. She said she expected to see results at the elementary and middle school levels within the next 2 years. High schools are a little bit different to gauge, and it could take a bit longer to show results in that area.
All right, Jesse, thanks so much. Well, coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, we'll have more about the Hope Scholarship and the university system of Georgia with an interview with Chancellor Thomas Meredith. And another reminder, Governor Sonny Perdue delivers his second State of the State address live on Georgia Public Broadcasting and television and radio tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Now, this Friday, be sure to tune in at 7 p.m. for Georgia Public Broadcasting special In the Spirit of Martin Luther King 2004. That program will replace our regular Lawmakers broadcast. Be sure to join us for that special tribute. Now stay tuned for Great Cars as that program explores the history of the Porsche. That's next right here on Georgia Public Broadcasting.
That is our broadcast for the second legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Wandy Lawson. For all of us at Lawmakers, good night.